Tuesday edition. It is orange and blue today. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason talking about the projections for RJ Harvey. Fantasy GM certainly excited about his ability, Mace, but will he dominate the Broncos backfield in 2025?
It depends how much work he gets. I mean, Sean Payton's running back usage last year, it was making the best of a less than ideal situation, but as you, Mr. Fantasy Guy, Cease, would know, it was a nightmare for fantasy players. And if you were counting on fantasy production, fantasy reliability from the Broncos at running back, you were pretty disappointed. I mean, if you were ranking NFL team running back situations 1 to 32, at least from a fantasy perspective, where would you have put the Broncos last year, Cease?
30.
Wow.
31.
So not dead last, but in the ballpark.
Yeah, because you want someone you can set it and forget it, baby. And you couldn't really do that with Javonte or Jaleel. Jaleel's nice as a spot player. You certainly can find that front pylon, right? But man alive, from that perspective, it was tough to trust the Broncos backfield. I think that changes with Sean Payton's guy, RJ Harvey.
It changes, but are we talking about something where it's reliably productive? Now, if RJ Harvey is a go-to guy from a fantasy perspective, and I'm not a big fantasy player, you are. I know a lot of our audience does play fantasy. But if RJ Harvey is putting up big fantasy numbers, that means they're big reality numbers, and everyone's going to be happy. So this is one of those things where it's a crossover on the Venn diagram, right? If RJ Harvey is putting up big fantasy numbers, then Broncos country is going to be pretty ecstatic, whether he's on their fantasy teams or not.
Right.
So,
yeah, you're going to get the numbers.
Great. Yes. So,
and the impact on Bo Nix we talked about yesterday, it's just how quickly can Harvey prove himself, right? And the pass protection is going to be an issue. I think we're going to have maybe not a pass protection show, Mace.
Yeah.
But when we're doing training camp, it's going to be like, here's your pass pro update, because that's the key to playing time as a rookie.
Yes. It's something we're going to be watching with great interest. And it's not something that I think we're going to have a real good read on probably until we get to training camp, because while you can get some work in on it during OTAs and you can start learning about identifying blitzes, identifying packages, the physical part of it in terms of picking up blitzes and doing things at full speed, you're not going to get a real good sense of that until you go full speed, full contact, full throttle. And that means it's going to be training camp when the full pads go on before you really start to get a grasp on that. And the trust level there, that's going to determine the amount of snaps that RJ Harvey gets and when those snaps come, especially if they come on third downs. You'd like to see RJ Harvey be able to play every down. You'd like to see him contribute on third down. But for him to do that, he's got to be somebody that you can trust to stay in the pocket and pick up a pass rush. You don't want him to be a tell. How often do you and I talk on this show about declaration of influence? Well, if he's not somebody that you can trust to pick up the pass rush, then all of a sudden you have him be that tell to where, okay, he's going out, he's going to run a route, or you're going to call a draw, you're going to call draw play to him. He's probably going to be there, or not probably, but there's a good chance he's going to be a focal point either as a target or he's going to be getting the handoff. And so a team's going to adapt its defense accordingly. Whereas if there's a good chance that, hey, he's going to be able to stay in there, pick up the pass rush, and then you've got to adapt accordingly to that, then a defense has to adjust to that. It's why I say a couple of years ago, for instance, we saw so much of Samaje Perine there on third downs. And we saw him when they went sub package, late in games, like when they went 2 minute, because they need a guy who was as likely to pick up a blitz as he was to go out for a pass. And so when they got into those close and late situations, Samaje Perine became a key player. And of course, last year, even though Javonte Williams wasn't really an effective runner, he could be a decent pass catcher, and he was good in pass pro. And so we'd see Javonte, even though he wasn't really doing much as a ball carrier, we'd see Javonte Williams in a lot of those situations. If RJ Harvey can pick up the pass pro element of his game, then we could see him in those situations, and that could really take his numbers to another level.
Yeah, that's when he puts on the turbo boost, that's for sure. And Sean Payton has talked about how he's used to using 2 backs, not 3. And I will guarantee you, he does not want to use 3 this year. But doing projections at this time, Mace, without us knowing the pass pro level of RJ Harvey, it's difficult for the experts out there like our friend Mike Clay.
Yes. So let's get into what Clay projects for RJ Harvey. Let's just put those numbers up here real quick. Does not project 1,000-yard rushing season for RJ Harvey. But this is actually pretty solid production for Harvey as a rookie. I mean, by and large, this isn't Alvin Kamara territory. I know that comp is going to come up quite a bit just because that's the standard for a Sean Payton rookie running back who's got this sort of dynamic production potentially in him. But if RJ Harvey ends up with close to 1,200 yards from scrimmage, maybe you'd like a few more touchdowns than 7 total touchdowns, but close to 1,200 yards from scrimmage, I think you're pretty satisfied. I would like to see maybe a bit more than 4.36 yards per attempt on the ground, but you look at that tally, close to 1,200 yards from scrimmage, 824 yards on the ground, 350 yards through the air, 7 total touchdowns. That's not bad.
Right.
It's certainly not a failure in terms of his rookie season. By the way, if you sort of go through all-purpose yards, or yards from scrimmage, I should say, it puts him, I believe, in the top 16 in terms of running backs, in terms of projections for Mike Clay at the start of the year. So this really isn't bad. I wouldn't say this is a disappointing outcome if this is what we're looking at for RJ Harvey, the rookie season. What do you think?
I think we would have liked the Bo Nix numbers a little bit better. Check out yesterday's show here on our YouTube channel, Mace. But I had 1,200 all-purpose yards.
Yeah,
I think a real good number for RJ Harvey this year is 1,200 all-purpose yards. And in a factor where we don't really know yet, Mike Clay had him at 1,174. I would say this, the catches, if it was 46, I would say, let's say conservatively 50.
Okay.
But if there's a chance he catches 80 catches this year. There's a chance. I'm not saying he'll do it, but there's a chance. And if I were doing my projections right now, I'd put the number at 50. So again, I think Mike Clay's pretty close here, but I think that catch number and even the yards per catch number, we can talk about that. Because brother, Alvin Kamara had 81 catches. And I think how many rushes? Like he had 81 catches. I don't think it was as many as Saquon Barkley as a rookie, but it was close, right? Yeah. And if the Kamara comparison is there, because it's totally going to be there. And again, I'm not projecting 80 catches, but I think 50 is a real good number for RJ Harvey at this time. And he might catch 75. He might be the second leading receiver in terms of catches on this team.
That's also 235 touches over 17 games. Okay. So
do you like that number in a number where we're all monitoring the touches? Or would it be 250? Do you like that number better?
13.8 touches per game.
Okay.
Now that's if he plays all 17. And again, sure, I'll say this for Mike, he usually factors in the injury potential, especially at running back. We know it's a high attrition position. So me personally, I want to see RJ Harvey get 15 touches a game. I think that's the magic number. If RJ plays all 17 games, that's 255 touches. So if he plays 15 games, so 15 times 15, that's 225 touches. So just for like the quick math there.
That sounds about right.
Yes. 15 squared, 225. So I think that's actually kind of a fair expectation to me, is 15 touches, and just sort of reflective of of how Sean Payton uses his running backs, right? Because let's just go, it's always great when I go and look up the stats here on camera when I'm doing a show. But Alvin Kamara, right? Rookie season.
It was 81 catches, top of my head, right?
Yeah. 120 rushing attempts and 81 receptions.
Wow.
So 120 plus 81 divided by 16 games played.
Yeah.
That was 12.6 touches a game. Now, of course, the difference is they had Mark Ingram there.
Right.
Mark Ingram isn't walking through that door.
Nick Chubb might be.
That's Nick Chubb coming off of significant injuries too.
Hoping and praying and wishing.
Yeah.
I don't trust Audric Estime, dude.
That's not the Nick Chubb that we know and love, though. That's the problem. I mean, we can see all the workout videos. Oh, Nick Chubb looks great when he's working out. You're going to have to color me skeptical because of all that he's been through. I mean, look, Javonte Williams, we were all dazzled by him as he was working his way back, but it never resulted in him looking anywhere close to what he was prior to the injury. So when we're talking about these running backs coming off of these catastrophic injuries, even with all that they've got at their disposal today in terms of the technology and the resources, rehabbing, there's a level of injury where, unfortunately, with all that you can do, you still can't get it all back. And we've seen it with Javonte, and I've got to be convinced before I could be sold on Nick Chubb looking the way he did before.
I know you're all T-Bird on us from the Crow. There ain't no coming back.
Yeah, I know you're optimistic. I know you'd love to see him in Denver. Hey, if Nick Chubb came to Denver, I'd be rooting for him. I'd just be a little bit skeptical.
Well, and color me skeptical on Audric Estime, dude. I think you and I are pretty close on the Estime thing.
Yeah.
But part of my kind of hope for Nick Chubb is that I don't trust Estime, and he could totally prove me wrong, and he's the best back in the NFL or whatever, dude. But I've called you dude twice.
It's okay.
Whatever, Mace. Like, we didn't see enough last year. Doesn't mean he can't change the narrative this year, but that's a young man with a lot to prove.
Well, let's look at the projections Mike Clay has for him. By the way, it's interesting. We're going to circle back to Jaleel McLaughlin in a moment, because Audric Estime is not running back 2.
Whoa.
Running back 3 is Audric Estime.
What if that happens? What went wrong? Because Estime, it sounds like is their RB2. He's the power option.
Yeah.
If he's not their RB2, what went wrong?
If this happened, if this type of season happened for Audric Estime, this is 53 touches over the course of 17 games. So just do the math on that. That's barely 3 touches a game over the course of the year.
Wow.
That means he didn't earn the trust. That means the fumbling problems didn't go away. And that's what it comes down to here. Audric Estime, remember, had the fumbling issues even in preseason, even in training camp.
Yes.
And then, of course, had the early season fumble, and he never got the trust back. And that's hard. When you get that reputation as a fumbler, Cecil, it's hard to recapture the trust of the coaches.
Yeah, it's who do you trust? Hubba, 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 money, money, money. And I haven't seen these yet, so it's fun exercise we're doing, because it means Jaleel McLaughlin's the RB2. And I don't know if I trust that based on, I like a power element. I like that Mark Ingram, who's not coming through that door, But man, what are the McLaughlin numbers then?
Well, McLaughlin has the trust, does he not?
He does, yes.
I feel like we're going to get into Billy Joel territory. It's a matter of trust, right? Trust is everything.
Yeah.
Audric Estime fumbles in training camp, fumbles in preseason, fumbles in the regular season opener, gets back from injured reserve, and fumbles against the Saints. And because of that, he can't get that trust back. Now, it's not like Jaleel McLaughlin hasn't fumbled, right? Because Jaleel McLaughlin, in his career, he's got a fumble on his resume. In fact, he had the fumble last year against Seattle. Jaleel McLaughlin and Audric Estime. There's Audric's Mike Clay projections. There's Jaleel McLaughlin's Mike Clay projections. Jaleel McLaughlin and Audric Estime both fumbled against Seattle in the opener. But Jaleel McLaughlin has a body of work.
Yes.
And that matters. Body of work, sample size. Jaleel McLaughlin had earned the trust. So also that body of work, that sample size, I think that goes into Mike Clay's projection as well. So in this universe, Jaleel McLaughlin, even though his body type and style would not appear to contrast with RJ Harvey, even though RJ Harvey and Jaleel McLaughlin are two different body types. Everybody's got to forget about 5'8", because I think people hear 5'8" and think Jaleel and RJ Harvey, oh, they're the same type of back because they're 5'8". They're not. They're completely
just look at the
different.
thighs.
Yeah.
Look at the thighs on these pictures.
Yeah.
Bring up RJ Harvey's. Look at those. That's superhero right there.
Yeah.
He's a flipping superhero.
Look at their thighs. Look at their calves. They're separated by like 25 pounds. At the same height, they are two completely different types of backs. They're both quick, but RJ Harvey has the body type and the stoutness to go between the tackles. He can burrow if he has to. 205, 207 is like 220 on a 5'10" running back. Okay.
Right.
So Jaleel McLaughlin, you just look at, he's slender. He's in space. RJ Harvey, to his credit, he's quick and fast, so he can go in space, but he's got the stout body type to go between the tackles. He can bounce off people.
Contact balance is great for him.
Exactly. So even though they're 5'8", they're different types of backs. But so you look at Jaleel McLaughlin there, and you can see that Mike Clay has got him in there with a pretty solid season. 5 touchdowns coming from him. Not too bad. But that's definitely RB2 territory. 660 yards from scrimmage. I mean, this is like, if you compare RJ Harvey and Jaleel McLaughlin, this is definitely a clear RB1, RB2 split. And with Jaleel McLaughlin, he's got him on the hook for 139 touches, and you divide that by 17, and that's 8.2 touches per game.
Okay.
For Jaleel McLaughlin. That's
stylistically, it's a little bit different. So I guess they asked the question, can RJ Harvey be the Thunder and the Lightning?
Yeah. Quite possibly. Now, the interesting thing, to just put that Jaleel McLaughlin number up real quick. So 139 touches, Cease. You want to know how many touches Jaleel McLaughlin had last year? Probably
about the same.
137.
Whoa, really close.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually not unreasonable. It's just, we're talking about styles of runners. So we sit here and say, okay, Audric Estime stylistically partners better with RJ Harvey because RJ's quick. RJ's fast. Yes, RJ can go between the tackles. Yes, like you say, contact balance and definitely he can take a pounding between the tackles. But in this universe that Mike Clay is discussing, what happens here is Audric doesn't get over the fumbling tendency. Also in this universe that Mike Clay is discussing, another running back doesn't launch, and that is Tyler Bidet, because Bidet is still listed on the roster here, but as you can see with Mike Clay's projections, not much of a factor, only 14 touches. And Tyler Bidet, I think, is the wild card here because there is some potential, and we didn't really get a chance to turn the page on it because just as he was about to get that opportunity last year was when he suffered that back injury. So I think you can't ignore him, and everybody's sleeping on him. I think I shouldn't say everybody. I think that's wrong. I think that's the wrong word for me to use. I apologize. The problem with this show is you get my thoughts in rough draft form because sometimes I'm thinking about them as I'm saying them. That's why I'm not a very good broadcaster.
Ha.
Okay. Because I'm processing and I'm just going through this and you're just getting me spewing it out all at once.
Talk it out, baby. Talk it out.
Yes, that's how I work through things, right? So Tyler Bidet really showed a lot of spark when he got those opportunities weeks 2 and 3. And certainly earned some trust.
Oh yeah. He was set to take over.
Yes, and then earn enough trust to where when they brought him off injured reserve for the playoff game, they activated him. Audric Estime lost his jersey. It was Tyler Bidet in there. Of course, didn't get much of an opportunity. You wonder if that game had gone a different way, if the defense had actually been able to get the Buffalo Bills off the field. Of course, we don't want to belabor the point, but everyone recalls how the Bills just ran it down the Broncos' throats. It was death by sledgehammer blow. Buffalo ran up a time of possession figure, the likes of which the Broncos had not endured in over 40 years, which is why you saw moves made to upgrade the spine of the defense, why you have Dre Greenlaw here, why you have Talanoa Hufanga here, because the back two levels of the defense weren't strong enough to withstand the assault that Buffalo put upon it, and certainly wasn't strong enough to withstand that from the Bengals, from the Colts, from the Chargers. And that's why you saw the changes. You saw teams gashing the Broncos, controlling the time of possession, controlling the flow of games. Even though you had a pretty good defensive line doing its job against the run, you had to make those changes. So now, hopefully, you have a defense that can get off the field and set up more opportunities. And so maybe you have a chance to find out a little more of what Bidet can do in that kind of game. Now, yes, you have RJ Harvey in there, but Tyler Bidet, he's interesting because certainly he has some speed as well, but also he's got some contact balance. He can bounce off people.
Yep.
He could too, even though not a huge back, he could also be somebody that presents a nice little contrast to RJ Harvey.
He's going to push Jaleel McLaughlin.
Yeah.
That's who gets pushed in this Mike Clay universe, which could end up being the way it works out.
5'8",
they don't need the power guy.
Yeah, 5'8", 197. So he's actually in between Jaleel and RJ Harvey in body type. Like he's kind of the split the difference guy between the two of them in terms of his body type.
And for a 5'10" guy, that would be about 210 pounds.
Yes. So there's enough size there to go between tackles. We can't sit here. He's not a small back. He's not a big beefy back like Audric Estime, but he's not a small back like Jaleel McLaughlin. Happy medium.
I think the key phrase that you were used there in talking about Tyler Bidet is trust. Sean Payton wants two guys he can trust.
Yeah.
Who earns that trust?
I don't know if we're going to find that out until training camp.
Till the preseason.
Maybe.
We got to see live reps, you know?
RJ Harvey's on this team. You and I have said Jaleel McLaughlin's in Sharpie. I don't know if we can say that anymore. Even though he's got a potentially unique role, and it's still there for him. And he does certainly have the ability to consolidate the trust that the coaches have in him. And that is the thing that he has going for him. Like, if he goes out there in preseason, is still quick, is still diligent, and is still trustworthy. Like, if he goes out there and we don't see him fumble at all, and he goes out there and is still making plays and continues to study the way he has and makes up for his lack of size with an ability to diagnose in pass pro to be enough of an obstruction to be adequate. And in brief bursts, that's what we saw from him in pass pro last year. Right. Not great, but adequate when asked to do that on those rare occasions. But it may well for him kind of come down to somebody else flubbing. Like if Audric Estime can't get over the fumbling tendency. And that could be the key thing here. If Estime can't get past this, like if Estime puts the ball on the ground a couple of times in the first 5-6 days of training camp,
you're calling Nick Chubb.
Or you're saying, if you're not calling Nick Chubb, Jaleel McLaughlin's on the team. Probably.
Bidet, you're up. Like Watson, you're up. Like it's going to be a battle that we will be dialed in on every single day. Quarterback situations resolved. Yeah. Who's playing running back?
Blake Watson might be in the same spot he was in last year if he wants it. And that's the key thing. Like he might be back on the practice squad there in relief. And then, the Broncos have had pretty good injury luck at running back the last couple of years. But if something happens, you learned last year, we saw it briefly from him, but there was that spark that he provided early in that Chargers game. So you saw enough to show, okay, if he has to step in, maybe he can handle this, especially in the passing game. There was no Mike Clay projection from Blake Watson, by the way, but I wouldn't dismiss him either. It's a little more wide open. And also with the thing with Blake Watson, even though he doesn't have a Mike Clay projection, Blake Watson could take Jaleel McLaughlin's job too, because he's a bit stouter and he brings all, I think he brings all that Jaleel McLaughlin has, the pass catcher as well. And perhaps he can bring that ability to make the first guy miss. Like that's the thing with Jaleel McLaughlin. You remember that play against Seattle last year? He's got basically a highway to the end zone and just goes down at first contact. Like that was the play that it sort of frustrates you, because that's sort of the one thing that kind of Jaleel is missing, is the ability to kind of bounce off the guy and finish it, turn that opportunity into a touchdown. And it just wasn't there. And it sort of shows just kind of what separates other running backs from him, unfortunately. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying last week when I did the show from Coors Field about how, as the Broncos grow, that maybe this team, as it gets better, it does maybe lose some guys that were integral in getting this organization back on its feet. But maybe as the roster talent improves, that some players just aren't in the mix the way that they were, say, in 2023, as the overall talent level improves, that a player who maybe was good enough to be on the roster in 2023, as the roster improves, isn't good enough in 2025. It's just sort of the reality of things, potentially.
Especially at that position. And it's not Hot Take Tuesday, and I don't like hot takes, but Blake Watson's the best receiving back on this team. He may be on the practice squad, but you said the key word, if he wants it. Other teams are going to still be interested, even though there's new rookies and a new class and new UDFAs. But if the vision Sean sold him on, it's kind of like the A.T. Perry thing. Sean sold these guys on visions. They have
Yeah.
interest from other teams. And if Blake Watson, like, hey, I'll give you this year, that's your vision, but next year I got to get a shot. If he feels differently, then he gone.
Dude, now I'm calling you dude. Dude, there are going to be some really talented players that get cut from this team.
Yep.
And land somewhere else. This is a tip of the cap to the restoration work that George Payton and Sean Payton have done on this roster. It tells you how much deeper this team is than it was 2, 3, 4 years ago. That the quality is such to where they're going to be saying goodbye to guys. And this is also, I think, why as you got to the back end of the draft this year, that they just took some swings on some really high ceiling guys. Like, okay, let's take a swing on Q Robinson in round 4, because if it works out, he might be an absolute stud who has first round level athleticism at the edge. But the reason he's sitting there in round 4 is because he barely played edge at Alabama because he was stuck behind first round picks. And then he got hurt when he finally got on the field because he had the elbow injury. And so he didn't have much film at edge. Or Caleb Lawner just being a converted basketball player who played double-digit snaps, and that was it. That's all the film that we had. That, okay, take a flyer on these guys because otherwise you're taking somebody who probably wasn't going to make the team, right? Another reason why you take a punter, because if you took somebody else, decent chance they don't make the 53, and if you expose them to waivers, they end up getting plucked and they go somewhere else, and then you just basically wasted a draft pick, right? So I actually do get the logic in the day 3 moves that they made, and it's sort of the type of thing that you can do because of where your roster is right now.
Mace, fantastic breakdown of this running back position, and you, sir, are a fine broadcaster. Never say anything different. Words are spells. Don't say anything different.
Sometimes I stink as a broadcaster, but I'm self-aware enough to admit that. But I appreciate it.
And when I stink, I just go, got tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's an honor to crack a mic.
You always have tomorrow until you're dead.
Exactly. So we'll keep going until then. Boy, that took a turn. Anyway, he's Andrew Mason. I'm Cecil Lammey. Help us out on YouTube, please, everyone. How can folks do that?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell, ding,
so that you
never miss
a vid. That's right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at MaceDever. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, and would you please stay frosty.